You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. And belly on up to the 9-foot homemade oak bar and pour yourself a cold one. 2023 entering our 5th season here in Sox in the Basement. This thing started back in 2018. It's 2023. My quick math says 5 years. Officially, I think in May, we're also going to have our 500th episode at some point this season. Maybe we will celebrate that in front of a live crowd at Cork and Kerry at the Park. The official sponsors of Sox in the Basement. Back in the fold again. And I'm excited about that. I gotta be honest with you.
Yeah, me too.
I touched on it a little bit on the last episode, but I'm pumped about that. Nothing to me is more White Sox, more that neighborhood, more fan-orientated. If I could find one place that just really brings it all together for me, it's the Cork and Kerry at the Park, the location that's there in the shadow of the ballpark at 33rd and Princeton.
What says, your best ballpark experience going to a White Sox game than going over to Cork and Kerry at the Park, either before or after the game, enjoying the game for whatever they put on the field, and but having that neighborhood to hang out where you walk in and everyone is there for kind of the same reason, right? It's a sense of community more so than even sometimes what you get in the ballpark where, I've never had anybody throw their garbage at me at Cork and Kerry at the Park. I have had somebody do that at the ballpark proper because she was drunk and thought I threw something at her, which I hadn't, because my hands were full at the time, and the only thing to throw with would have been like one of my feet or my teeth, and I'm just not that talented.
Look, I was going to keep talking about our new sponsor, but now I got to hear about this. Somebody threw garbage at you at the ballpark? When did this happen?
I'm on the outfield concourse, and I'm walking with my brother-in-law. We had just stopped to get food for everybody, the entire row. And so we're both carrying this stuff, and I stopped by a garbage can for 1 second. I just had to readjust. I don't have the best hands in the world, right?
Everybody's done that. Everybody's taken their stuff and put it on top of the garbage can real quick because they're dropping something. It's almost like that oh good, it's a halfway point when I'm juggling things.
Exactly.
I've done it. And we've all done it.
So I'm trying not to have a nacho incident or something like that. So I'm doing it, and all of a sudden something hits me, and it's a beer cup, and it was empty, and I'm like, what the f***? And I look over, and let me do that again because I didn't mean to swear there.
No. We'll just bleep it. Keep going.
So it was empty. So I'm like, what the hell was that? So I look over and there's these two women sloshed out of their minds, and basically calling me out for not being a man because I threw something at them. And I'm sitting there. I'm like, literally, I'm overloaded with stuff. I'm like, what could I have thrown at you? It's like I'm like, what the. Go away.
Listen, the best part about this is nothing about what I said leading into that story should have triggered you into this story. And it happened easily, even if it happened last season. Did it happen last season?
No, this is years ago.
So this happened years ago. I don't mention anything that should have led you in any way to this story. This is is this like a breakthrough for you? Were you sitting down trying to work on your own interpersonal self for the new year? And because you were working on your interpersonal self, these old memories, these frustrations, these angers are coming out. This is like the new Ed for 2023?
No, this isn't like some New Year's resolution breakthrough. I just rather spend time at Cork and Kerry at the Park sometimes than I would on the outfield concourse with drunk women who think that I'm an octopus.
All right. Can I get back to just the quick mention that if you're gonna go to Cork and Kerry at the Park, it's great people watching. It's a who's who of people that are in the White Sox universe. We bump into beat reporters over there. We bump into other podcasters over there. We see great fans over there. It's your home base for White Sox pregame, postgame, and viewing parties. Cork and Kerry at the Park in the shadow of the ballpark at 33rd and Princeton. All right. Well, can I get a warning buzzer or something before you just spew something that's been bothering you for years on the show?
Sure. Yeah, that's fine. I will. I apologize for my vulgarity.
We had to use the bleep button. How often do we have to do that? If we have one of the members of the 108 on, I got to use a bleep button. I've never had to use it for you, my friend.
I rarely do that. I don't know where it came from. So yeah, maybe it is some long-standing painful memory that I needed to purge or something like that. But it's...
All right. We want to talk about New Year's resolutions, and I think this is probably the best time. For the White Sox, though, not for us. I don't believe in that stuff. I'm not going to promise to go to the gym because I'm not going to show up. I'm going to do this less and do this more. Never. Just doesn't work. It's impossible to coming out of the holidays because you've basically gone and done all of your vices over the last week and a half, right? You eat too much, you drink too much, you party too much, you're up too late, you walk around in your pajamas, you stop exercising, and then you're going to all of a sudden flip all that around on January 1st. It never works. But the White Sox,
that's not how it works at all.
The White Sox have some time here, so they have time to make reasonable resolutions for this year. Do you have something for the Chicago White Sox that you would like to see from them in the 2023 season?
Yeah, well, two of them I think are kind of the normal resolutions for people, like losing weight and stop smoking. Because losing weight would be like getting rid of some of the fatty contracts that they need to get rid of, like Larry.
You know what's crazy is if they were a real organization, they'd just look over that $5.5 million this year and next year and DFA it and move on. Right?
Exactly.
Like class organizations just get rid of that money.
Bye-bye.
Right. They admit fault and they move on from something like that. They don't let it clog up your infield. I mean, what does it take, do you think? Do you think that he needs to show up? You think Garcia has to show up in spring training and play terrible? And then they go, okay, well, we wanted to just see what he'd be like with a new manager? Do they really think that makes a difference at this age?
Honestly, I think the thing that Garcia needs to do to get DFA'd is come on this show.
Well, yeah, that would get him DFA'd.
Yeah, I mean that would do it right then and there. But no, I don't know that there's anything that he can do on the field to cause him to lose his spot necessarily, unless it got to a point where he was. I mean, you think about the depths that Dallas Keuchel had to go to, right? How bad did Dallas Keuchel have to be before they jettisoned that contract, before they DFA'd him? Larry would have to be some kind of useless. I mean, it would have to be something.
But he already is.
I know,
he
and that's
did
what
the
I
exact
don't
same
get.
thing. That's what's funny about it. The amount of money that they would eat moving on from him is going to be the same as when they moved on from Keuchel. So I mean, it's weird to me. I feel like that it's maybe they're just trying to dump that contract. Maybe their idea is if we can find a good deal and we could dump that off in the exchange, then we don't have as much egg on our face. Because we talked about that before here on the show. I mean, look at. I want a GM to be heartless.
Same here.
Rick Hahn is not a heartless GM. Kenny Williams, for all of his faults that I've talked about on the show, not really heartless, because there's something that they get an emotional attachment, or they have an attachment where they're afraid that people will make fun of the move, right? So they chase bad money. They're like a gambler that loses $1,000 in the sports book, and then knowing nothing about the next matchup, goes up there and tries to win it back by just throwing a dart at the board because they can't just admit they screwed up on the first bet and lost $1,000. So it's perfect with you draft Nick Madrigal. He doesn't turn out to be exactly what you want him to be. He ends up being injured, but fans like him. You make a move, you bring in Craig Kimbrell. On paper, it makes sense at the time, but it fails. You can just eat $1 million and take that money and go after anybody you want to in free agency, but you insist upon making a trade. And then when you acquire Pollock, of course it makes sense to bring Pollock in, right? But then when you bring him in, the manager doesn't use him the way that he is intended. Therefore, it doesn't work out the way that it should have worked out, and you're still chasing Pollock. And then A.J. Pollock has to do you a favor and opt out, or you'd still be sitting there with that string, that mess that you couldn't admit that you made a mistake on. And that's what generally happens with this team. Like I think anybody coming in and looking at this team heartlessly, just looking at with the pros and the cons and what you have to eat, you got to eat Moncada. You got too much money on him. You got to fix him. But for Garcia, even if you did fix him, a fixed Garcia is not something that's really going to change your prospects for winning and losing a World Series. So if you have these younger guys and you think they're capable, and they show they're capable in spring training, Lennon Sosa looks good in spring training, right? Roman Gonzalez looks good in spring training. You've got guys that are out there that are playing so well that you don't really need to keep him. And Garcia's, he's going to look okay in spring training, okay? Because you're going to get a lot of crappy pitchers that he's going to get to look good against. It's not going to be the major leagues when he's out there in spring training. If you see these younger guys and you think that you can go in that direction, even if you start the season with him, a bad start, you got to be able to move on from that. And that's the thing that I think most teams would do. And this team always waits a long time to pull that trigger. Like how many times over the last couple of years here on Sox in the Basement, if we made a comment like, this guy's got to go, Dallas Keuchel's got to go, this other guy here, he's got to go, this isn't the right player right here. I think and we're not the only ones saying it, all the fan base is saying it, and the team waits 2 extra months, right? Everybody knew Tony La Russa was done. He was never going to leave. He was going to get to finish out the season. Only a medical issue gave the White Sox a glimpse of what it would be like with a different guy at the helm. And so that's one of the more maddening things about the franchise is that you can look at a player, or you can look at a manager, or you can look at something they're doing and say, this isn't the right way to do things. They need to change. And everybody can see it, and they won't admit it. They wait 2 months and then they admit it. They don't prove us wrong. They just can't admit that we're right.
Yeah, it's a little bit of, there's two things there. One is being able to admit when there's fat to trim off your roster or off your coaching staff or whatever. When something isn't working, jettison it. Get rid of it, move on, find something else. Even if you're not sure it's going to be something that on paper should be better, trying something new is better than sticking with the same thing over and over again and hoping for a different result. And then the other part of it is that self-awareness, to just sit there and be like, okay, we can make a mistake. Okay, I can admit that I made a mistake here. That, even the Craig Kimbrell thing, if Rick had just come out and said, well, that didn't work the way I thought it was going to work, so we're just going to move on here and see what happens next, and we're just going to, we're going to take our lumps and go on and try and win a championship. I don't think any Sox fans would have sat there and batted an eye, right? But when it comes to stuff like that and the awareness of Tony La Russa is not working out, the idea that, we have players like Larry Garcia, Yohan Moncada, to a certain extent, Yasmani Grandal, to a certain extent, AJ Pollock was maybe, in that camp before he opted out. You could start looking at Joe Kelly, guys like that. You've got these contracts, you're sitting there going, I'm not really sure about these guys. Having the awareness and having the self-awareness to sit there and go, all right, this is what I need to do. Okay. And we, and I think, frankly, when you talk about New Year's resolutions, the cliched ones of I'm going to work out more, I'm going to drink less, I'm going to smoke less, I'm going to be a little bit nicer to animals and waiters or something like that. Whatever it is that you say you're going to do, the whole point of it is just sitting there saying, I got to look and see where I'm flawed, and I got to see if there's a way I can fix it. And that's what we're asking the White Sox to do. Just like any other team, be a little heartless with yourself, look at the flaws, and then say, hey, you know what, I can fix this. Or, hell, I can't fix it, but I can try and work around it. And at least be able to admit when something isn't working, but there's nothing you can do about it. Even that is a little bit more, I think, what most fans would respect than what sometimes we get.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I'm really concerned now about how you've been treating animals and waiters. And if you've got a family member that needs to switch to a new age of life, Hyatt Home Medical Equipment can help you out with that. Grandma, grandpa, mom, dad, maybe even you. You're getting old over there. You got a lot of problems. We heard it at the beginning of the show. They can set up your house like a smart home.
What's that you say?
You can open and close doors.
Trifle deep over here.
With the touch of a button on an app. They'll set up lifts to get you up and down the stairs. And then also, if you got sleep apnea, they got the latest in CPAP technology. They've got oxygen tanks if you want to keep a spare so you're not lugging it back and forth and always refilling it. If you have somebody that needs oxygen, they got the latest in diabetes control and so much more. They're going to work with your insurance, and if you mention Sox in the Basement, you get additional money off. See all they have to offer at hhme.com, but better yet, stop in and speak to an actual person in a big, beautiful, modern showroom with testing rooms for some of this equipment at 3518 West 95th Street in Evergreen Park. My resolution for the White Sox is very simple. Be a smarter baseball team. It's the one thing that matters more to me than numbers, than trying to figure out a guy's defensive metrics, than wondering whether or not we're going to hit more home runs this year. Can we just have a few moments in 2023 where there's a Twitter trend going along, or a video being passed around, or a Sports Center highlight, or whatever it is, however you consume like things that are going on all around Major League Baseball, and it actually features the White Sox. It features like a play in which the base runner does something smart to allow for the other runner to score. or the player on the field in a weird broken play realizes he's supposed to charge the opposing player and it turns into a double or triple play because somebody used their baseball acumen and was smart about things. Or somebody gets up there and understands situationally it's time to lay down the bunt even though they're not a bunter. They're more of a power hitter, but it's just the way that things are set up. They see the third baseman sleeping. Anything like that. I want to see a smart baseball moment a couple times this year. I want to see something that indicates to me that the new coaching staff and Darryl Boston have done something, right? Like that there's some new attitude on the team and that they're going to make good decisions. That the manager is going to make a move and actually outsmart the other guy in the other dugout, which is something we have not seen on this team in quite some time. That's what I want for 2023. If we see that, they'll be a good team. That and Luis Robert doing really well because he's the linchpin to the entire season. He needs to be healthy and be him and what he's supposed to be. And you're going to see this team go far. That and Tim Anderson being healthy as well because he's also the engine that makes the car go. But I'm looking at Luis Robert and I'm looking at smart baseball plays. If I see that, I guarantee you this is a playoff team.
Yeah, well, and that's something that's been missing, right? That's something that we've not seen consistently probably since 2005.
No, they were stupid then too.
Of the team,
they were stupid then too. They had some dumb players in 2005. You can't look at it in rosy glasses. Aaron Rowand was one of the worst base runners I've ever seen. Okay, I brought it up on the show before. Terrible decisions in the playoffs and in the World Series. There was some dumb out there, but overall, there was smart. And I love Aaron Rowand too. I really do. I've met him before. He's a very nice guy. He's been very nice to my kids.
Well, yeah.
Okay. But he even admits a couple of boneheaded plays out there, but they were overall smart when they made their decisions.
And I'm not saying, well, first of all, if you're looking for a team that is always smart 100% of the time and has zero stupidity on the team, that's gone from a New Year's resolution to going backwards in time to sitting on Santa's lap and saying, this is what I want, old man. All right, you're going to have guys that are a little dunderheaded from time to time, and you're going to have guys that struggle with certain concepts and are going to throw to a wrong base here and there, are going to do something dumb on the base paths, are going to get themselves out in a situation where they probably shouldn't have. But overall, right, when they won the championship all those years ago, one of the things we saw that team do was situational baseball, right? Hit behind a runner at second base to get him over to third, and then be able to execute getting him in with less than 2 outs. Be able to understand what the situation was on the infield and align themselves correctly to play defense to get a guy out. Understanding when you can throw home, for example, with a guy on third base versus, just taking the out and giving up the run. All those things lead to an overall intelligence, an overall baseball intelligence that sometimes has been lacking on the south side of Chicago. Right? It just has. And it escapes teams, every team in the league from time to time. But this is how you overcome some of the other teams in the AL, right? How are you going to overcome the Guardians to win the division? Well, you have to execute and you have to play smart baseball. How are you going to overcome the Astros in the playoffs? You have to execute and play smart baseball. Or the Blue Jays or the Rays or the Yankees or whoever you're going to face in the playoffs. You have to execute and play smart baseball. You can't be dumb when it comes to the playoffs. And sometimes you got to be lucky. And sometimes you got to be smart about when to do something incredibly stupid and steal first base in the ALCS and have it work out for you. But there's, overall, yeah, you need guys who are, by and large, in the game, have their heads in the game, are thinking situationally, and are not necessarily relying on what the coaches tell them and what your third base coach tells them, what Pedro is going to tell them from the dugout. They still have to execute it, and they have to execute it the right way. And that's, yeah, you need a baseball IQ for that.
Yeah, I think it's a really important thing. We try to figure out how are we going to tell if things are going well. Well, first off, they got to get off to a quick start because the Guardians aren't going to come out and flounder. That's a young, hungry team with a really good manager. And in an organization whose organizational philosophy is shown, it's better put together than ours. They're able to weather the outside influences of different things going on or injuries or things better than us. We just throw our hands up as an organization and go, oh, we're just a victim of injuries and circumstances. Okay. So they're not going to stumble. We have a greater chance of coming out of the gate stumbling. We can't. we got to be off and running. That's the first thing I'm looking for. Secondly, I'm looking for smarts on the field. What are they going to be in terms of team IQ in 23? Is that going to be increased? Because it has to. And then you start looking at individual players, right? And, you mentioned a couple of names right there when we brought up Garcia, who I know we pick on a lot, but you're right. There's other guys on this team that have contracts that we're kind of stuck with right now. Yohan Moncada hasn't shown you anything at the plate since 2019. And COVID legs be damned, that was 2020. What's his excuse now? And you're locked in for an awful lot of money with him. Do I think he can come back and be a serviceable ball player? Yes. I'm going to be watching him very closely. The guy on that list, though, when you rattled off other guys that, you're worried about or that we have under contract, who I think could have a much better year is Joe Kelly. I every time I hear his name, I think immediately to when Don Paul, former White Sox pitcher, been on this show a couple times, and I asked him specifically about, do you start chasing bad outings at the beginning where your ERA, when it's up on the scoreboard, is like an 18 and you're a relief pitcher? And he's like, yes, you do. And he got out of the gate bad, and he was coming off an injury, and he probably felt pressure, and he probably didn't handle it as well as you'd want him to. And they're not robots, these players. That's not me bashing him by saying that. But if I saw anybody out there that could make a turnaround, if he's used properly, that's on the coaches. If he's put in the right situations against the right type of hitters for the type of pitcher he is, and he's given an opportunity to go out there and flourish, and he gets off to a good start, that's a guy who I think could make a very quick turnaround on this team. Oh,
yeah. Well, 100%. And I don't think that you can discount anything, right? You could very easily have Yohan Moncada show up and remake what his game is going to be.
Don't believe it.
Okay.
Don't believe it.
I don't believe it. I don't believe it. But I'm saying there's always that possibility. Now, I haven't heard anything to suggest that that's going to be the case. Okay.
Well, I mean, his manager met with him. I mean, they've had conversations, so I'm sure it's all fixed now.
Yeah, I'm sure.
He'll be in the best shape of his life in spring training. He'll be one of those ones. It looks like he's in the best shape of his life. He's very focused, and he's just hitting the crap out of the ball in the batting cages. All right, cool. That'll be the hype. That'll be him and Yasmani. You see, him and Yasmani, that's what it'll be. They'll be best shape of their life. I don't need disc in my back. Well, did you get it fixed? Don't worry about what I did.
Don't worry about my back. Yeah, I don't need it to swing, squat, or do anything, right?
Hailstorm Brewing Company, the official brewery of Sox in the Basement, is also on tap over at Cork and Carry at the Park, our proud sponsors. Look at that symmetry right there. Located in Tinley Park at 8060 186th Street, right off of 80th Avenue. It's in the middle of a really growing brewing community out there. There's several breweries out there. Hailstorm leading the way, craft beer, music, scratch-made kitchen. It's a big, giant beer hall, and right now they got some specials. 3-pack crowlers, $25, mix and match, $10 discount for a full case of cans, mix and match. And remember, they're in a lot of local liquor stores. I see them in Binny's all the time. Really good brews. And they have a very extensive list right now up there. So if you decide you want to go out and you want to visit them, just incredible stouts out there. But then they make this lager. It's my dad's favorite, American lager called Hotel Life. And he's a Miller Lite drinker, and he swears by this stuff. Good. And if you're not a craft beer guy and you want to try something that is gonna be better than what you like, but it's not going all of a sudden you're gonna have to jump off a cliff and try something crazy. Try out Hotel Life. I know it's on store shelves. I know that it's over there at the brewery, and it comes highly recommended to me from all the people that aren't real big craft beer nuts, and I enjoy it as well whenever I stop in there. Once again, 8060 186th Street, right off of 80th Avenue. Learn more at hailstormbrewing.com. I went down a rabbit hole on White Sox history this weekend. I don't even know how I did it. I think I'm flipping through Instagram and something popped up in a suggested story or whatever. It was all about Buck Weaver.
Really?
George Buck Weaver was the third baseman for the White Sox when they win a world championship in 1917. He is there during the 1919 Black Sox scandal. When you watch 8 Men Out, he's played by John Cusack, and he's the one that didn't do anything to throw the series, but he still gets thrown out of baseball and banned. And I was reading a little bit about Buck, and I got angry. It's really weird to me as a fan that I didn't live during this time period. Sure, I saw the movie, and I know that John Cusack's portrayal is probably not exactly Buck Weaver, because first of all, they don't look very similar at all. I think real Buck Weaver would kick the crap out of John Cusack in a fight in 30 seconds. And that's how I equate everybody. I look at a picture, I'm like, yeah, that guy could take that guy. But anyway, I'm reading about it.
Oh, yeah. You look at Swede Risberg from back in that era. It's like, nah,
those are some tough guys. Those guys look like they hang out with gamblers, don't they? They drink, they smoke, they throw baseball games. That's what they do. Okay. I mean, nobody was surprised by that. But Buck Weaver, it's interesting because I was reading this story, and, you know, when you read about how people were viewing him, even during the trial, even during the World Series, it's not a Hollywood thing that he was an innocent victim who shouldn't have been banned from baseball. Ross Tenney, Cincinnati Post, writes about the World Series at the time. They're hopeless and heartless. The White Sox have a hero, though. He is George Weaver, who plays and fights at third base. Man, you could just hear the old-timey music. And he fights and day after day, Weaver has done his work and smiled. In spite of a certain fate that closed about the hopes of the Sox, Weaver smiled and scrapped. One by one, his mates gave up. Weaver continued to grin and fought harder. Weaver's smile never faded. His spirit never waned. The Reds have beaten the spirit out of the Sox, all but Weaver. Buck's spirit is untouched. He was ready to die fighting. Buck is Chicago's one big hero. Long may he fight and smile. He hit .324 with 11 hits in the 1919 World Series. When the court case occurs, where even though they're acquitted, and Kennesaw Mountain Landis becomes the commissioner because, as the owners knew, they had to have somebody that was lifetime who actually had power over the owners. Wouldn't that be nice again in baseball? Wouldn't it? Wouldn't that be great?
Wouldn't it?
Wouldn't that be great? Okay, but back then, that's what the whole purpose of Kennesaw Mountain Landis. So these kind of scandals never happened again, or at least somebody had like nothing but absolute power. When Landis gets rid of all 8 of them, Buck Weaver sues Comiskey for his salary from the 1921 season, where he would have played if not being thrown out. And he wins. So Joe Jackson, shoeless Joe Jackson, does the same thing. And when he wins, Comiskey presents in court all the grand jury testimony from the 8 men out case, and Jackson's salary is reverted back to Comiskey. The judge decides to put away the ruling. And so Comiskey never does that to Weaver. So this person that's always been portrayed as extremely cheap in Charles Comiskey, the founder of the Chicago White Sox, never goes after Buck Weaver's salary and actually allows him to be paid for 1921. But he fights all the rest of the players. This guy tried to get reinstated so many times, all the way up until his death. He was basically saying, murderers eventually get out. I got life. And it to me, this is one of those things where I just can't understand why 100 years later, Major League Baseball can't correct this, right? Do you think he served his time for something he didn't even commit? It's amazing to me how commissioner after commissioner after commissioner just doesn't care. And we can sit there and we can have these debates. And I think a lot of this came from the fact that I watched Pete Rose open up a casino or a gambling place, whatever it was. It was a sports betting place over the weekend in Cincinnati. Here's Pete Rose, who was thrown out of baseball, who still thinks he should be put back in and put in the Hall of Fame. And he's literally working for gaming industry people. Buck Weaver just was he got caught up in something and then played his heart out. So, I never want to hear people sit around and talk about Barry Bonds cheated, but can we just let him in? And Pete Rose, he served his time. Take care of Buck Weaver first, please. All right. I think all White Sox fans should. That should be your answer in every bar argument that you ever have with anybody about guys that are left out of the Hall of Fame, or guys that deserve to be in there, but they've been lifetime banned or whatever it is. If you're talking about Pete Rose, if you don't immediately answer back Buck Weaver as a White Sox fan, then you're failing your team. Okay. So if you've never read about him, sit down and read about him. I knew a lot about him, but I kind of went down a rabbit hole. I was reading articles on him and, picking up a book, and I was flipping through my one. I have all these White Sox history books. I got another one for Christmas. People just give me this stuff. They're like, oh, this is great because you got the podcast. You can read it. And I'm like, this is great. But 90% of this I've already read in another book because I have them all. But I did it this weekend. For some reason, I got myself right down a Buck Weaver wormhole.
Yeah, and it's not to say that Buck Weaver belongs in the Hall of Fame.
Just reinstate him. He doesn't need to be in the Hall of Fame. Just reinstate him. Just lift his ban. Okay, so he can rest in peace. He's buried over here on the south side in Mount Hope Cemetery. Just put like a little thing of flowers there and say, you're back in, Buck. I mean, that'd be great. I mean, unfortunately, nobody in his family will ever know. But I mean, we always see these things that people do like that, like are symbolic. You want to do something goodwill, Major League Baseball? Jerry Reinsdorf. You want to do something goodwill? Buck Weaver. I mean, it'd be the weirdest thing, like for all the things that he could do to make the fan base happy. But wouldn't it be nice if like he showed us that he knows enough about White Sox history that he'll care about poor Buck? Like I'm calling upon him to do that. Why aren't the White Sox pushing this more?
And here's the beautiful thing for Jerry. It wouldn't cost him anything.
No.
I mean,
it wouldn't cost him anything. And then you can, I don't know. I'm sure you could put up. You don't have to put up a statue. Don't do that.
You could open up Buck's Cheese Pucks, and just have cheeseburgers there. I mean,
right? Like get a food station for Buck. Buck gets a food station, right?
Right.
Like reinstate him and give him a food station. The Bucky's Burritos. All right. I mean, who cares? Like, wouldn't it be great? I mean, just do something like that. Little things like that. Like, because that's what they need to start doing. I'll be honest with you. They don't need multicolored 42 different price point seat charts like they put out last week. Because now the first 10 rows of the outfield are different from rows 11 on back. Because we've got a nickel and dime because people got angry, and we know that there's been people who dropped their season ticket renewals, and they got to figure out how to get as much money as they can out of people, so they release that. Less of that and more of these little things I'd like to see. Or at least if you got to do the cheap things, do something else to offset it, right? Little for you, little for me. Let's try to at least keep it even. Don't just scream in my face that you don't like us as fans. Like pretend, lie to us that you care.
Also, you could do a Buck Weaver bobblehead where you push a button on it and it asks, "Did you throw the World Series?" And the bobblehead can only shake its head no.
They should hire us. Really, they should. They won't.
They really ought
but
to.
They should hire us.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.